Needing to get right in week 13, the Washington Commanders held possession for over 40 minutes for the first time in a single game this season, and they got back to their winning ways. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, everybody, to today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. And I appreciate you for coming through here today. I'm here with you every Monday through Friday, as long as I'm not sick every day. I appreciate you coming through every single day. And again, I do appreciate the patience. I appreciate the well wishes that have been sent my way as I have been battling through an illness, coming out of it now. Still a little bit sick, but definitely feeling better and well enough to see if we can lay down an episode for you here today. Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode. Since the last episode we published, we actually went over 11,000 subscribers. So I appreciate everybody who has subscribed on YouTube, which is where we can count those subscribers. Can't count how many subscribers or followers we have on Apple and Spotify and all that stuff. But I know that the Spotify wraps are coming up. I appreciate everybody who always shares every year their Spotify wraps and all that stuff with us as well. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Washington Commanders' current playoff standings, 7th seed in the NFC, but trending upwards potentially this weekend. We're going to talk about whether or not we're going to see more Chris Rodriguez Jr., more Marshawn Lattimore, which would be any Marshawn Lattimore, of course, coming out of the bye week. And then, of course, we're going to talk about how the Washington Commanders got right in week 13. And we're going to do all of that thanks to our friends over at FanDuel. New customers, you place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So we're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to take portions of previous episodes that we would have had if I wasn't sick this week and this weekend. Obviously, because I was sick, I was not in Northwest Stadium when the Washington Commanders shellacked the Tennessee Titans 42-19. I'll just be completely transparent with you. I was going to predict about a 7-point win for the Washington Commanders. Not that I didn't have confidence that they couldn't handle the Tennessee Titans, but as I do with my betting, I don't typically kind of go over like the 10, 11-point spread type of window. But watching the Washington Commanders play that game and get their 8th win of the season, obviously a lot of confidence renewed in what the Washington Commanders are doing, and a lot of confidence renewed just on the field and finding that identity again. And that's something that head coach Dan Quinn had mentioned to us leading up to the game, that he wanted to really see this team reestablish their identity, go back and find what was making this team so effective during that 7-2 run. And really be able to kind of recapture that on the playing field. And I think that's really kind of the theme of the entire game, is not that you saw a new Washington Commanders offense or not that you saw a new Commanders team. What you saw is a return to the Commanders team that was so successful before. And of course, we did get a chance to lay down our crossover Thursday. The episode that we missed last week was the final preview episode, where I go into detail on the 3 must-dos that we lined out with Tyler Rowland and Locked On Titans in the crossover. So we at least had those 3 things to talk about. So we're going to talk about those things here as well and talk about the ones that they hit and how they were effective. And the first one that we laid out with Tyler on Thursday was to force 3 and outs. Now, the Tennessee Titans actually hadn't been forced to have 3 and outs for their offense all that often. I think over the last month or so, it had been about 5 or 6 times total in those 3 or 4 games. The Titans had been forced to have a 3 and out offensive possession, which is pretty good number if you're an offense overall. So in this game alone, and then when you go back to before this game even, right, we talk about the time of possession battles and how often the Washington Commanders lose games when they lose that time of possession battle. Well, while the offense was still trying to figure it out, that's kind of why we went this direction, is if the offense isn't going to figure it out yet, which clearly they did, which is good. But even if they're figuring it out, complimentary football, get yourself off the field, get yourself that rest time that you need. Don't rely necessarily on the offense to drive those long lengths and give you that break. Get yourself off the field quickly to make sure you can preserve your own energy as much as you need to and as much as you can. And you do that by forcing 3 and outs. And in this game against Tennessee Titans, 4 possessions for the Titans lasted 3 or fewer plays. That includes the 2-play drive that ended in a fumble that the Washington Commanders recovered and a turnover on downs drive. 5 of the Titans' total drives in this game resulted in 0 first downs. That is excellent, excellent defense. And that is exactly how you go about protecting yourself just in case the offense kind of sputters here and there, which they really didn't do in this game. They did have a 3-and-out, the Washington Commanders offense. They had at least one first down on every drive, but 2 of their drives, one of those at the end of the first half, and then the 3-and-out that started the second half. Now, on top of that, only one Washington Commanders possession, not including the final drive of the game in garbage time, had fewer than 2. And that was the third possession of the game where there was only 2 first downs because they had a 16-yard touchdown pass from Jayden Daniels to Terry McLaurin before they got their third first down. I think we'll take that as well. So very good on the 3-and-outs for both sides, very good on getting the first downs for the offense, very good on getting off the field for the defense. So certainly green check mark on that must do. Must do number 2 is to get Jayden Daniels right again, right? And we talked about this leading up to the game as well. It was less about what Jayden was doing and more so what the defenses were figuring out against him and the need for offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury to kind of do some things to really shake those things free, protect his quarterback and set him up to be successful. And I think they did a very good job against Tennessee Titans. Jayden Daniels completing 25 of his 30 pass attempts. That's 83.3%, and his third best completion percentage this year, not counting the 2-for-2 week 7 he had against Carolina Panthers. 10% of his passes went for touchdowns. That's a season high this year, and his third highest passer rating of the season of his career so far as well. So Jayden looked confident. He looked poised, deliver passes across the entirety of the field. He was 13 for 14 to the left, 3 for 6 over the middle, 9 for 10 to the right. And that's something that we talked about, that ball disbursement as well. Coming into this game. So good to see that the team obviously identified some of those same things and went ahead and addressed them. And in fact, it led to the Washington Commanders scoring 40 points for the third time in 2024. That's the most in a season since they set the franchise record with 4 games of 40 points or more in 1991, which is also the last time they appeared in a conference championship game and the last time they won a Super Bowl. So not saying that this team is going to do those things this year, but obviously, things are going in the right direction for this offense once again and throughout the season. Our must-do number 3, Ben Sinnott as a fullback. I wanted more usage out of Ben Sinnott. He got 24 snaps in the game, not his highest snap count in the entirety of the game, but the main idea of the entire conversation there, right, was to reestablish the power run game. And we've said it over and over. It can't just be a Brian Robinson Jr. thing. There's got to be another mechanism, which they went and found another mechanism. That other mechanism was Chris Rodriguez Jr., which is great. Something we've been asking for a few weeks now. Happy to see that they went ahead and went back to doing it. I'll take it. I'll take however it comes. Either way, they're finding a way to establish that power run game without just Brian Robinson. And I shouldn't say establish, I guess, because B-Rob certainly established the power run game. Chris Rodriguez Jr. came in and helped them continue it. Now, Ben Sinnott did line up in the backfield on 9 of his 24 snaps. So they kind of did that as well. So I'd say green check mark on all 3 must-dos in this game, which leads to a win, which leads to a very dominant win for the Washington Commanders. I did watch the game feeling very bad for myself from the couch in my living room. So I was doing that, and I was texting with insiders during the game as well. You know, not the normal kind of play-by-play type of style, but just kind of having conversations back and forth. So that was a good, uplifting day. I was really happy for the guys. Really happy for you fans to be able to see that as well. 3 stars of the game. It's kind of hard, man, because there's a lot of stars deserving this one. I gave my 3rd star to Terry McLaurin, 8 catches, 73 yards, 2 touchdowns. I gave my 2nd star to Frankie Louvu, 3 tackles, 1 sack, 2 quarterback hits, and a tackle for loss. And I gave my 1st star to Chris Rodriguez Jr., 13 carries, 94 yards, and a touchdown. And yes, with Chris, there's a little bit of the emotion of how he got there and, you know, taking advantage of the opportunities. Obviously, Brian Robinson Jr. deserves a lot of love, as well as do some other players, Jayden Daniels, so on and so forth. So we only have 3 stars to give, but there's a lot of guys out there who would take shares of them. Speaking of Chris Rodriguez Jr., are we going to see more of him after we've seen what he could do in 2 games where he's gotten solid opportunities? My money is on yes. I hope I'm not wrong, because I've been wrong before about this very conversation, but we're going to talk more about that coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. Well, with Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. So say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contracts. So ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. $40 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Today's episode is also brought to you in part by Prize Picks. And with Prize Picks, you can win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. On Prize Picks, you pick 2 to 6 player stat projections, and then you select whether you think those players are going to hit more than that stat projection or less than that stat projection. And if you're correct, the more correct you are, the more money you get. The harder the projection, the more money you get as well. And like they say, with as few as 4 correct picks, you can win up to 100 times your money. Prize Picks is the best way to get in on the action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. So sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play your first $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup on Prize Picks. Run your game. Are we going to see more Chris Rodriguez Jr.? Are we going to see more Marshawn Lattimore? Those are two things that we want to see more of in our sustain and our improved segment here on today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Again, coming back to you after missing a few episodes, out sick. I appreciate you all's patience during that time frame. So we're going to go over 3 sustains, 3 improves. So what was supposed to happen? The Washington Commanders were favored by about 5.5 points. I think that line is shifted to 5.5 points before kickoff, if I remember correctly. And obviously the Washington Commanders delivered on that spread. I'm gonna go ahead and believe that most of you will believe me when I tell you that I was going to predict the Washington Commanders win and buy over that spread. So we'll continue that going into next week against New Orleans Saints. Now, the bye week brings up an interesting opportunity for all NFL teams, right? So it's an opportunity, obviously, to get healthy, but it's also an opportunity for coaches and players to kind of look back, reflect on the season they've had so far, and decide where they want to go. So this week's sustain and improve, not only does it come from the Tennessee Titans win, or the win over the Tennessee Titans specifically, but also kind of has a moving forward type of feel to it as well. And so the player, and last week we started this differently. We started doing it player, play, and then a team-focused element. So we'll start with the player, and obviously it's going to be Chris Rodriguez Jr. This is something, again, that everydayers, we've been asking for a little while now, and Chris went all the way up and even ended up getting released for a weekend, before being added back to the active roster and all those things with Austin Eckler's, concussion injury, which we, again, continue to hope that he's recovering as well as he possibly can from, going on IR and most likely out for the season. But when you watch Chris Rodriguez Jr., and I know this coaching staff can't be held accountable for last year or anything like that, but even if you go back to last year, specifically that New York Jets game last year, Chris Rodriguez really kind of showed that he's a gamer. You know what I mean? I don't know if he necessarily struggles through practice. We talked about during training camp in the preseason and everything that Chris had some poor practices. He had some opportunities they didn't capitalize on and things like that. And he knows that as well. I've talked to him, on the side about that. But we've also talked about, Chris and I, the opportunity to get into a game. And when that opportunity comes, really kind of being able to go out there and showcase what you can do. And in the 2 opportunities he's really had this season, one against the New York Giants, and then this last weekend, the Tennessee Titans. I think what Chris has shown is that he's certainly capable of carrying a role for this Washington Commanders offense, and he's consistently able to do that. Now, again, nobody's calling for Chris to start over Brian Robinson Jr. or even be second in touches when Austin Eckler is healthy or anything like that. But it just kind of goes back to kind of making that case for potentially having 4 running backs. If you go back to the active roster conversation we had in the beginning of the season, I mentioned that with Chris Rodriguez preseason, unfortunately, I couldn't really stand on the table and pound it and say you need 4 running backs. But in a potential conversation, I did have the faith that Chris Rodriguez Jr. would be worthy of a 4th roster spot if they decided they wanted to go that direction. Obviously, they didn't, but I think Chris is now kind of making good on some of those promises that we made during the preseason and the training camp period. Now, why do I think that we could see or even should see more of Chris Rodriguez Jr. moving forward? Well, because this is December football. we're going to get into January football, and if all goes well, which it should go, we're going to get into playoff football for the Washington Commanders. And you're going to need a guy like Brian Robinson Jr. to be as healthy as possible and have as much tread left on his 2024 tires as you can possibly have. So a game plan, kind of like what we saw against Tennessee Titans, get B-Rob in there, get the ground game going, get some early punishment on that defense going, get some scores in there, sprinkle in some Chris Rodriguez. Now, obviously the games are closer. It's going to be, more B-Rob, less Chris and all that stuff. But what I don't want to see is the team go back to where it's B-Rob, 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 then it's Jeremy McNichols or an Austin Eckler type, where it's a completely different style of run game. Continue to kind of pound that rock at your opponent and use Chris Rodriguez as not a change of pace back, but as a continuation of the pace, just with a different player. And because Chris is coming in there against an already worn down a little bit defensive front and all those things, he's going to continue having some of that success that he was able to have against the Tennessee Titans, I believe anyway. The play that we want to see continue, we're looking specifically at the 16-yard touchdown pass to wide receiver Terry McLaurin. And it's not just that pass, but something that we noticed, and I know the television broadcast really kind of harped on Terry McLaurin being lined up on the right side. I have to be honest with you guys, it kind of made me laugh a little bit because they were talking about how it's been focused on how much Terry McLaurin is lined up to the left side. I'm not saying that I'm the only one that's doing that and I'm the only one to blame for that, but it just kind of makes you chuckle because I know where that's coming from. However, I also mentioned the fact on this show that they can line Terry McLaurin up on the left side 100% of the time if they want to, as long as they're appropriately attacking what the defense is doing to adjust to it. And in this game, not only did Terry McLaurin line up on the right side more than usual, he did, but the Washington Commanders offense, Cliff Kingsbury also drew some things up and designed some things to take away what defenses were doing when Terry was lined up on the left side of things. And specifically, what I really liked was seeing some of the routes that Terry ran, and they were pretty much all successful, where Terry was lined up wide to the left, but at the snap of the ball, the way that the route trees and the route combinations all work together, he actually ended up more of the slot type of receiver with a tight end or another receiver outside of him to the left, and forced the defense kind of switch up and change up their coverages. It gave Terry a lot of room to operate. It gave Jayden a lot of big windows to throw to Terry in. And the result, of course, was McLaurin catching all 8 of his targets, gaining 73 yards and scoring touchdowns. So it was a beautiful design. You love seeing Terry move around a little bit, but also when they did keep to the left, which they did 70% of the time again. So again, it's not like he wasn't on the left side of the formation, but the way they were using him on there, the way they were countering what the defense was doing with other receivers is something that we talked about after the Philadelphia Eagles game. So glad to see the Cliff Kingsbury doing some of those things. And then the team aspect that we want to see sustained coming out of the bye and moving forward, breaking some trends. Now, by returning to some old trends, the Washington Commanders were able to break some trends as well. And specifically talking about Cliff Kingsbury falling back in love with that power run game. Robinson and Rodriguez combined for 29 carries and 197 yards. And now again, in a closer game, 29 carries, maybe 22 of those are B-Rob and 7 of those are Chris Rodriguez Jr. Fine. But in a blowout game, you know what I mean? Give it a 16-13 split. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what you want to see moving forward all through there. And then again, the new wrinkles to Terry McLaurin to get him more involved and more successfully. So those are our 3 sustains. Chris Rodriguez Jr., the player, we want to see him some more moving forward. The play, we want to see them continue to move Terry McLaurin, but also continue to move him around when he's on the left side, continue those things, and then continue that return to that power run game and finding a way to get that power game going all through the game, even when Brian Robinson Jr. wasn't on the field. Our 3 improves. What we want to see improved: player, cornerback Marshon Lattimore. He was as close as he's been since he's joined the Washington Commanders being on the field this weekend. Wasn't there. We got the bye week now. And how sweet and poetic it would be for Marshon Lattimore's first game active as a Washington Commander to be in New Orleans against the New Orleans Saints as a team captain. We need to see it happen. I'm booked. I've already got all my arrangements made for New Orleans. Looking forward to going to see Ross Jackson down there in New Orleans, Louisiana. We need to see Marshon Lattimore down there on the field as well. As far as the play, quarterback sacks, we want to improve there. Look, we're getting nitpicky here, right? But Will Levis was sacked just twice, despite having 37 pass attempts. And Will Levis is one of the people that has one of the highest pressure to sack rates in the league. Now, again, this is one of those they get paid too because the Washington Commanders had 9 quarterback hits. That's a lot of quarterback hits. So they hit Will Levis, including the sacks, 11 times on those 37 dropbacks. So it's not like he wasn't being pressured. So It's a little bit nitpicky, but you obviously want to see some of those pressures get converted into sacks moving forward. And then as a team, obviously everybody hates seeing the kicking woes return, even if it's only hopefully for a week or two. Obviously, Austin Cyber had the issues where he got that groin injury against the Dallas Cowboys that really cost the Washington Commanders. And then Zane Gonzalez, unfortunately, making all 6 of his extra points, but missing both of his field goal tries. That's not good. That's not what you want to see. I would expect to find out that the Washington Commanders tried out some kickers during the bye week or right after the bye week ahead of New Orleans, but we'll see what happens with that. Either way, they need to get that operation back on track where it was before. And if they do that, they will continue to put pressure on the teams ahead of them in the NFC East and in the NFC playoff position. 2nd in the NFC East, 7th in the playoff position. How the Washington Commanders can gain ground, even though they're not playing this weekend. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle all the NFL action this weekend for Week 14 with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers, you can bet $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your live bets all in the NFL, all in one place. So if you want to place a pregame $5 bet for your first bet, do so. Hit the money line, hit it straight up if you want to, or you can take the points or you can give points, however you want to do it. Or you can go in there and you can make your live bets on NFL games, and FanDuel will give you everything you need to pursue your latest hunch in the middle of a game, whether you need your live stats, the play-by-play, or so much more. You can get it all on the same page where you're going to make that bet. So go to FanDuel.com today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, our first episode back since I fell ill. Still a little bit ill, so they appreciate you for being patient. Appreciate you bearing with me here. The Washington Commanders didn't get a lot of help in Week 13. Of course, they won their game, which is the only thing they can control. But unfortunately, the Baltimore Ravens and kicker Justin Tucker specifically unable to topple the Philadelphia Eagles, which would have helped the Washington Commanders gain a little bit of ground on the NFC East division leaders at this time. Now, with what the Washington Commanders were able to do, their odds to make the playoffs now stand at 71%. So that's a pretty good rate that we're going to get some Washington Commanders playoff football. I think the best part of it right now is you can say that the Washington Commanders are going to earn this playoff spot. This isn't going to be like when they won the division in 2020 and just kind of fell into it because everybody else was banged up and they were just a little bit less banged up and all those things, right? We're talking about a team that's going to go out there and earn a playoff spot. So when it comes to climbing the wild card standings, the 6th-seeded Green Bay Packers are right now 9-3. So they've got one more win than the Washington Commanders, 2 fewer losses, and they've got the Detroit Lions this weekend. Now, the Detroit Lions are favored in that game. I would pick the Detroit Lions if I picked all the NFL games to win that, but that game's happening on Thursday night. So you're going to get a little bit of Thursday night action that applies to the Washington Commanders. So you definitely want to watch that game, and you're definitely rooting for the Detroit Lions because the Washington Commanders are not going to catch up to the Lions at this rate for that #1 overall seed. That would be amazing, but that's not going to happen at this stage with the way that the Lions have been playing. Even if they lose to the Green Bay Packers, the Lions or the Eagles will likely clinch that #1 spot. So you want the Lions to go ahead and get that because then it also helps the Eagles not get that. And of course, we want that as well. Now, as far as wild card contenders are concerned, you want the Carolina Panthers to pull off a major upset over the Philadelphia Eagles, or sorry, not the wild card. As far as the NFC East division title is concerned, you want the Carolina Panthers to pull off that upset over the Eagles. But if the Eagles win, they could actually secure a playoff spot, not secure the division, but they could secure a playoff spot with a little bit of help. The 3 teams that are nipping at the heels for the Washington Commanders' final wild card spot right now are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Arizona Cardinals, and the Los Angeles Rams, who all sit at 6-6 currently. The Bucs are hosting the Raiders, the Rams are hosting the Buffalo Bills, and the Cardinals are hosting the Seahawks. So while the Commanders are at home, off for the bye week, all 3 teams that are about a game behind the Commanders in the win-loss column for the wild card race are at home as well. The Bucs are going to be favored against the Raiders. The Rams will be underdogs against the Bills, and the Cardinals are probably going to be favored against the Seattle Seahawks. You're going to want all 3 of those teams to lose, the Bucs, Rams, and Cardinals. So you are Lions, Raiders, Bills, and Seahawks fans this weekend as it stands with the Washington Commanders playoff spots. Another team to keep an eye on, the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons and Buccaneers actually have matching 6-6 records. but the Atlanta Falcons have the division tiebreaker after sweeping the Buccaneers this year. So if the Atlanta Falcons somehow lose their grip on the NFC South to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, then the Falcons jump into that wild card pool where the Buccaneers are. So if you want to keep an extra eye on them, you're actually looking for Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons to lose to the Minnesota Vikings. That would be beneficial to Commanders fans and the Commanders playoff odds as well. So if you want to add the Vikings to that list of teams that you are cheering for, that would be the Vikings, the Eagles, the Bills, the Seahawks, and the Rams. No, the Raiders. That's who you want to root for. Let's do that again. Raiders, Bills, Seahawks, Vikings, Lions. Those are the 5 teams we're rooting for there for the Washington Commanders in Week 14. That's going to do it here for this episode of Locked On Commanders. Again, appreciate all your patience as I get back to full health. Continuing to do so, not quite there yet, but in the meantime, if you got questions or comments, all you got to do, become a Locked On Commanders insider. You can text them to me directly. We're going to have an insider mailbag episode tomorrow. Try to catch up on a little bit more of what you all want to talk about. So again, join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Get involved on that. Now make your second listen of the day, the Locked On NFL podcast. First up, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off in the morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. And then in the afternoon, roll by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. It's the all new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. Every day, thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.